Hello, my name is Andrea, and today I'm going to be animating a foxtrot. Now when I say I'm animating a foxtrot, I don't mean the dance. I mean a fox, the animal, the one I've designed in a previous video, you know, trotting. Like a slightly faster quadruped walk cycle. Here we go. I've already set up my file so it's ready to animate. I like to use this template. The red lines are just there to indicate the middle of the screen, and it also indicates an area that we like to call action safe. Basically, anything outside the red box is too close to the edge of the screen. You can see that I make sure that the characters stay inside this action safe zone. And the black border is just there to block out everything that is outside of the frame. When you start animating, you should have already done all your designs. Your backgrounds and character designs should be all final. And you can put your character turn right in your file. Mine's a symbol and the character just rotates, but you could also just throw in a JPEG that has all the views at once. Something like this. Now, let's get started. First things first, we have to trace. I start by tracing the body from my turnaround, and then I move it over to line up with the sketch from the storyboard. In this trotting motion, there should be some twisting in the front of the fox's body, so I'm making sure also to trace other views of the torso, namely the front of the torso, where the majority of the twisting is happening. I also realized that the butt was wrong, so I gave him a better butt. Good butts only. That's my motto. Whenever I have multiple views of something, I like to put them in a symbol. And you can set a symbol to hold whatever particular frame you need while you are animating. It makes it easier to organize your assets. Let's move on and trace some other stuff. I'll trace the legs. I decided to trace some of the leg in different sections to make it easier to manipulate, but for the most part, I'm just going to be redrawing these for the different positions. I trace the tail, move it over, and alter it to match the sketch. I do the same for the head, trace it so it's on model, move it. The head has to be tilted up a bit for the pose, and I need to fix the model so that it can be in this position. I also traced a second ear. I just felt it looked a bit flat without it. Now that we have everything traced, let's start moving those limbs around. In every walk cycle, a leg will have 4 main poses. The forward pose, the pass pose heading back, the back pose, and then the pass going forward. But of course, legs come in pairs. Humans only have 1 pair of legs, so in general, the second leg is in the opposite position from the first leg. So when one leg is forward, the other one's back, and when one's passing in one direction, the other's passing in the opposite direction. When it comes to quadrupeds, however, it's a lot more complicated. And it probably has something to do with the fact that they have twice as many legs. There are 3 speeds of quadruped walk cycles: walking, trotting, and galloping, or running. The relationship between the positioning of the legs is different for each. In a walk cycle, 3 legs are in contact with the ground at a time. In a trot, 2 legs are in contact with the ground at a time. And in a gallop, only 1 leg touches the ground at a time. The timing is also different. A walk cycle is about 32 frames, a trot is 16 frames, and a gallop is 12 frames. For the animation I'm doing, I'm timing it to music, and the trot timing matches most closely to the beat. So let's look at this trot cycle in slow motion and try and figure it out. One thing I'm noticing is that the pass poses happen at the same time. Also, the front and back poses happen at the same time, with the front legs apart and the back legs apart. This is unique to a trot. So with our fox, I'm going to go ahead and pose his legs in those 4 positions. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we just have to in between it, right? Easy, but not so fast. We have to think about some things before we start just willy-nilly drawing a picture in between each of these main poses. The first thing I want to talk about is arcs. If something is traveling in a straight line, the in-between would be somewhere in the middle, on a straight path. But in our case, this is a cyclical motion, so everything is moving along a curve that reconnects with itself. Each of these poses show an extreme. The front, where the leg is coming down in contact with the ground, the bottom as it moves towards the back, the furthest back as it lifts off, and the top as it's moving forward. Remember, the direction is also important. Now with a curved line, we can connect these points, and it would create a smooth motion. But we also have to remember the foot contacts the ground, so the bottom of this motion should be flat. So the foot should follow this path. But what about spacing? If the spacing is perfectly even, that means it's traveling at a constant speed the whole time. Let's think about that. This part along the bottom, I think it should be at a constant speed, as it's touching the ground, and he's moving forward at a constant speed. But if we change the spacing, it changes the speed. The closer together, the slower, and the further apart, the faster. So I'm pretty sure that the feet should slow a bit as they pick up and touch down. So at these parts, the spacing can be closer together. With that information, when we place our first in-betweens, let's place them along this curve, but closer to the slower parts of the action. The closer we put it to the slower parts, the slower that part will be. And I don't think it slows down that much, so I'm just making it a little off-center. Now, if we further break it down and add more in-betweens, we'll see that these frames are more spread out, where it's faster, and these are closer together, where it's slower. That makes for a more natural motion. After a bunch of work, here are the legs, all animated and stuff. But this kind of looks weird, doesn't it? It's like the body is perfectly still and the legs are moving, like a dog being held above water and doing the doggy paddle. We need to add some bouncing motion. As soon as something leaves the ground, it is in free fall. That means gravity is going to cause the object to accelerate downward at 9.8 meters per second squared. Acceleration is a rate of change, and it predicts the change of speed, and for our case, the change of spacing between frames. So if an object like our fox is traveling up, the downward acceleration will at first cause it to slow down, making the spacing closer and closer together until the upward motion is overcome and the fox begins to fall, gaining more and more speed, adding more and more space between the frames until it hits the ground. Any sideways motion, however, will remain unaffected by the changes in speed caused by gravity, so any sideways spacing should remain even. Now when it hits the ground, the speed for the most part is maintained, just reversed in direction. A ball would lose some of its speed and impact, but our fox is pushing off the ground to make up for the loss. So to create this bouncing motion with our fox, I'm stretching the body symbol so that when the fox is in the air, with all its legs spread out, it is the furthest up. And when its legs are in the two past poses, it is the furthest down. I then take the first in-betweens and move them up so they are closer to the peak. And do that again to the second in-betweens that approach the peak. You can also achieve this utilizing the easing function in Flash, but it's always good to know how to do it manually. And here's what it looks like. I didn't want the head to look like it was being stretched, so I did the head separately, moving it up and down, and I also added some drag, so that the nose angles down on the up motion and angles up in the downward motion. I decided that the head looked a bit stagnant, so I added some rotation, 3 views, Since the rotation of the character design would be too extreme, I made an in-between, a halfway between the side and the next pose in the rotation. And then another in-between, just so it's more subtle. I do the same thing I did with the body, putting the head in the symbol, and holding whichever of these frames looks best at the point in the animation. And then with the tail, I'm actually going to put the base of the tail inside the fox's body and sort of bounce it around. And do the top of the tail outside the symbol so it can move more freely. I added a drawing so that the tip of the tail could curve away from the motion, and then another drawing to transition between the two drawings. Now all I need is to draw the connections, connecting the two parts of the tail and the head to the body for every frame. Now it's time for a coloring montage. There you have it, a foxtrot. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, or leave a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!